This is World News coming to you live from Algiers. I'm Miriam Zian, and these are the headlines. After signaling tougher pressure, Washington imposes new sanctions on Iran. Tehran calls them a crime against humanity. Trump says the Strait of Hormuz is open and Iran has lost its leverage. Coming up next, the Zionist aggression claims more lives in Gaza and the West Bank. Martyrs killed in strikes on various areas of the Strip. EU and 14 countries demand Israel to stop obstructing UNRWA. Following the wildfires in Jijil province, Algeria's prime minister attends the victims' funerals, meets with their families, and confirms that instructions have been issued to ensure full support for those affected as quickly as possible. And a wave of popular solidarity and aid convoys are reinforcing relief efforts. Welcome back, and first in our news, the United States has announced new sanctions on Iran as President Trump rules out negotiations for now and signals a continued focus on economic pressure. Tehran has condemned the measures, while Iran's leadership is calling for greater domestic production and less reliance on the dollar. The latest moves come as both sides remain at odds over the way forward. Nabil Khazini.
The economic pressure on Iran is entering a new phase, and this time, the battlefield is less about territory, but about a confrontation that is shifting further into the economic arena. Washington has stepped up sanctions, seeking to tighten Iran's access to international finance and increasing the costs of doing business with Tehran. US President Donald Trump says Washington is not negotiating with Iran for now, and that economic pressure will continue until Tehran is prepared to engage on US terms. Iran, however, says this strategy amounts to economic warfare. Iranian President Masoud Pezeshkian argues that American pressure will ultimately prove futile, while the country's supreme leader is urging greater domestic production and less reliance on the dollar. But the picture is more complicated than a simple contest of pressure and resistance. 6 months into the conflict, Iran remains under severe economic strain, yet its government has also shown an ability to adapt, while domestic efforts involving regional powers are still seeking a way out, particularly over the Strait of Hormuz. That leaves Washington with a difficult calculation. How far can economic pressure go before it stops creating leverage and starts closing the door to diplomacy? For Tehran, the calculation is equally stark: whether endurance can turn sanctions from a weapon of pressure into an incentive for greater economic independence. For now, the financial vice is tightening, but neither side appears ready to release its grip.
US President Donald Trump said the Strait of Hormuz is now open to maritime traffic, arguing that Iran's ability to threaten vessels has become extremely limited, in his words. In a phone interview with Axios on Friday, Trump said Tehran's ability to respond is now limited and that Iran does not want to face further US strikes, referring to previous US military operations against Iran. U.S. Central Command CENTCOM announced that internationally recognized shipping lanes in the Strait of Hormuz are now clear of Iranians' naval mines following a months-long U.S. mine-clearing operation. CENTCOM Commander Admiral Brad Cooper said the operation involved U.S. Navy divers, Navy SEALs, and air units from all 4 military branches. U.S. Central Command Commander Admiral Brad Cooper said U.S. forces had helped around 1,500 commercial vessels transit the Strait of Hormuz in recent months, stressing that the international shipping lanes through the strait remain open to maritime traffic.
As recently announced, the U.S. military has achieved a major milestone in the Strait of Hormuz. we have successfully cleared sea mines in the Strait's international shipping lanes that were laid months ago by Iran's Islamic Revolutionary Guard.
Mohsen Rezai, Secretary General of Iran's Supreme National Security Council, said Tehran is preparing conditions for reopening the Strait of Hormuz after mediators asked it to specify its demands. He said ending the war in the region is among those conditions, and Rezai added that Iran has agreed with Oman on a shipping corridor through the strait, partly in Iranian and Omani waters. In an interview with Al Mayadeen on Thursday, he said ships would use a designated route through the strategic waterway if the United States accepts Iran's conditions. So Iran's acting defense minister, Brigadier General Majid ibn Riza, said Iran has managed to change the balance of power in the region on the ground. In a post on X on Thursday evening, Ibn Riza said Iran had shown that the era of bringing armies from overseas and issuing threats is over. He added that what he called ridiculous media displays cannot change realities on the ground or the identity of the victorious side.
On the ground, it has demonstrated that the era of hit-and-run attacks, deploying armies from across the oceans and issuing threats is over. No amount of theatrical media coverage can change the realities on the ground or determine who emerged victorious. Iran's millennia-long history should be understood before addressing the Iranian people. They deserve to be spoken to with respect.
And the Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi said restoring diplomacy is possible, but only if the US recognizes that pressure doesn't work. In a post on X, Araghchi said he held constructive discussions with Qatari Prime Minister and Foreign Minister Sheikh Mohammed bin Abdulrahman Al Thani. He added that Washington must build trust, engage respectfully, recognize Iran's rights, and honor its commitments.
Putting diplomacy back on track isn't impossible. It hinges on US understanding of one simple fact. Pressure doesn't work. The US should build trust, speak respectfully, acknowledge our rights, and uphold commitments.
And the United States stressed that dialogue is the only way to reach a lasting agreement between Iran and the United States. Speaking to reporters, UN's regular press briefing in New York on Thursday, UN spokesperson Stéphane Dujarric said the organization had received a letter from Iranian Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi regarding what he described as US economic terrorism operations against Iran.
The letter has been received. It has been distributed to Security Council and General Assembly as requested to by the authorities. You know, I think the assessment is that this conflict, even in somewhat of a frozen kinetic phase, continues to do a lot of harm to the region, continues to do a lot of harm to the global economy. I think that the Secretary General is concerned about any new measures, any additional rhetoric that we see that could lead to an escalation.
And in occupied Palestine, 5 Palestinians were killed in Israeli airstrikes targeting several areas across the Gaza Strip since dawn today. 3 Palestinians, including members of the same family, were killed in an Israeli drone strike in southern Gaza, while another Palestinian was killed in a separate strike in Gaza City. And a Palestinian child was also killed in an Israeli airstrike targeting a tent sheltering displaced people. And the Islamic resistance movement Hamas said that the Israeli occupation's crimes against the Palestinian people will be met with nothing but greater anger and confrontation. In a statement issued on Friday, Hamas called on the Palestinian people across all governorates of the West Bank to escalate all forms of resistance, disrupt the occupation's calculations, and confront its crimes and settler attacks.
The West Bank will remain a source of revolutionaries and heroism, and our steadfast people will continue clinging to their land, rights and principles. Our resistance will not deviate from the path of loyalty to the blood of the martyrs, and will preserve their legacy until freedom is achieved and the occupation is defeated. We hold the occupation fully responsible for the repercussions of this bombing and the escalating crimes, and for the continuation of its brutal policy based on killing, demolition and intimidation. We affirm that the continuation of the aggression will not create security or stability for the occupation. We call upon our people in Jenin and all the West Bank governorates to escalate all forms of resistance, disrupt the occupation's security calculations, and confront its crimes and the attacks of its settler gangs.
And the European Union and 14 countries on Friday reaffirmed their support for the United Nations Relief and Works Agency for Palestine Refugees UNRWA amid the continued Zionist measures disrupting the agency's activities and operations. In a joint statement issued by the diplomatic missions of the European Union and 14 countries, including Spain, Italy and Germany, all members of UNRWA's Advisory Commission, the signatories strongly condemned the illegal entry into the agency's Qalandiya Training Center and the seizure of UNRWA facilities in the occupied East al-Quds on August 25. And the UN Human Rights Office condemned the Trump administration's designation of Palestine Action as a terrorist organization. In a statement on Thursday, UN High Commissioner for Human Rights Volker Turk said the designation appears to impose disproportionate and unnecessary restrictions on freedom of expression, peaceful assembly and association, as well as participation in public affairs. He warned that the broader use of the term terrorism can negatively affect civic space. On Syria, the Arab group at the United Nations reaffirmed its steadfast support for the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic. In a statement delivered by Qatar's permanent representative to the United Nations, Sheikha Alia Ahmed Saif Al-Thani, during the Security Council's monthly briefing on the situation in the Middle East in New York, the Arab group reiterated its rejection of foreign interference in Syria's internal affairs and any attempt to undermine its security and stability. It stressed that Syria's unity and stability are essential to the security and stability of the region.
The Arab group reaffirms its unwavering support for the sovereignty, independence, unity, and territorial integrity of the Syrian Arab Republic, and rejects any external interference in its internal affairs, as well as any attempts to undermine its security and stability. The group emphasizes that Syria's unity and stability are essential pillars of regional security and stability.
And regarding updates on wildfires in Algeria, acting on President Abdelmajid Tebboun's instructions, Prime Minister Sifir Ghayeb and several government members attended Friday's funeral for the victims of the Jijel wildfires in eastern Algeria. The victims were laid to rest amid grief and solidarity, as Ghayeb offered condolences to their families and prayed for the victims, the recovery of the injured, and the safety of Algeria and its people.
وأهليهم الذين فقدوا أحبتهم وآباءهم وأمهاتهم ونحن نلتمس اللهم أنزل عليهم الصبر والسلوان اللهم أخلفهم في مصوبتهم بما هو خير.
The Algerian Prime Minister Sifir Ghayeb met Friday with families of the Jijel wildfire victims, conveying President Abdelmajid Tebboun's condolences and assuring them of the state's support. Ghayeb also heard their concerns and needs, reaffirming the government's commitment to providing assistance and addressing their needs as soon as possible. The Algerian Prime Minister Sifigri conducted an aerial tour by helicopter on Friday to inspect villages and areas affected by the wildfires in Jijel province and assess on the ground the extent of damage caused by the fires, according to a statement by the Prime Minister's office. Algerian Prime Minister Sifigri said instructions had been issued to provide full assistance to all those affected and meet all their needs as quickly as possible.
Following this painful tragedy that has affected our people, especially in Jijel, Skikda, Tizi Ouzou, Bijaya and the rest of the country's provinces that experienced these devastating fires, allow me, on behalf of the President of the Republic, the government and the Algerian people, to extend our sincere condolences and deepest sympathies to the affected families, praying to Almighty Allah to grant mercy to their deceased and a speedy recovery to their injured. I also affirm that the President of the Republic's instructions aimed at providing comprehensive care and support for the injured and affected individuals were issued during the meetings held since yesterday with local authorities and the relevant ministers, addressing the needs of affected citizens. All of these requirements, under the instructions of the President of the Republic, will be handled as swiftly as possible.
The Prime Minister said firefighting operations involving aerial intervention are currently underway at several locations following an improvement in weather conditions that had hampered firefighting efforts yesterday.
Unfortunately, yesterday and the day before, the weather conditions were difficult, with the winds reaching between 80 and 100 kilometers per hour. As a result, we were unable to intervene using aircraft. Thankfully, today, with the weather having stabilized, we were able to intervene at several locations using aircrafts. Therefore, we can say that the situation is currently stable in Jijel province. Allah willing, we will continue to stand together during this ordeal. This is nothing unusual for Algerians. By nature, whenever the nation calls in any situation, we find Algerians standing together, the people, the government, and the army.
Sifigri also commended the efforts of the various security and civil protection services as well as the citizens who rallied together during this difficult period.
Praise be to Allah. Through you, I would like to thank all the security teams, civil protection, the national gendarmerie, the police officers, the army, the local authorities, civil society, and all the good people in this country who have demonstrated the true spirit of the Algerian people and the Algerian commitment to standing by one's fellow citizens during this ordeal. All we can say is we belong to Allah, and to Him we shall return. We wish the injured a speedy recovery. Allah willing, these mountains will be replanted and will become green again, just as they were before. This is our determination and our decision, and we will not back down from it.
After returning from Jijel, Algerian Prime Minister Sifigri visited the major burns hospital in Zeralda, west of Algiers, on Friday evening, following instructions by President Abdelmajid Tebboune, where he checked on the health of people evacuated from the affected areas for medical treatment. Ghrieb was briefed by medical staff on the patient's injuries, their severity, and the treatment they are receiving. He said President Tebboune is closely following their condition and stressed the need to provide them with the necessary medical care and closely monitor their recovery. As wildfires ravaged several provinces in central and eastern Algeria, authorities deployed major resources to contain the flames and protect communities. Yasin Irakti tells you more.
As fires engulfed several provinces in central and eastern Algeria, authorities mobilized major resources to contain the flames and provide relief to affected families. But amid the devastation, another powerful scene emerged. A wave of popular solidarity, with aid convoys arriving from across the country, highlighting national unity in a time of crisis. Here in Jijil, the past few hours have been anything but ordinary. Fires have consumed forests, smoke has blanketed villages, and families have faced fear for their lives, homes and property. The situation has been particularly severe in eastern Algeria, following fires in neighboring provinces including Bijaya, Sétif, Tizi Ouzou, Skikda and Annaba. As strong winds spread the flames, emergency services mobilized to fight the fires, evacuate residents and prevent further destruction. On the ground and in the air, substantial resources were deployed. Civil protection sent additional personnel and firefighting vehicles, while command centers monitored the fires and directed resources to the areas most in need. Firefighting aircraft and helicopters also joined the operation. AT-802 and BFBE-200 aircraft alongside ME-26 helicopters operated by the Algerian People's National Army Air Force took part in efforts to contain the flames. The civil protection, the army, forestry services, local authorities, medical teams and security personnel work together, with protecting lives the first priority. The scale of the disaster prompted action at the highest levels of government. Algerian President Abdelmajid Tebboune followed developments, offered condolences to the families of victims and declared 3 days of national mourning. On the instructions of the President, the Prime Minister and several government ministers travelled to Jijil. Officials visited hospitals and affected areas, monitoring firefighting operations and support for victims. In Jama' bin Habibi, one of the worst-hit areas, the delegation attended funeral ceremonies and offered condolences to families. As the flames began to subside, another mobilization gathered pace and solidarity. Convoys carrying water, food, mattresses, medical supplies and other essentials arrived from Algiers, Bijaya, El Bouaghi, Boumerdas, Batna, Sétif and other provinces of the country. They carried more than aid. They carried a message that affected communities were not alone. As Algeria continues to fight the remaining fires, the response has once again revealed something deeply rooted in the Algerian people. The belief that protecting and standing by their nation comes above all else. When one part of Algeria is in danger, the whole nation responds.
And the 3-day national mourning period declared by President Abdelmajid Tebboune continues in Algeria for a second consecutive day following the loss of several citizens in wildfires that swept through provinces in the central and eastern parts of the country. National flags are being flown at half-mast across the country, while celebrations and national sporting competitions have been suspended for 3 days. And on Thursday, President Tebboune extended his heartfelt condolences to the families of the wildfire victims, expressing his profound sorrow over the loss of lives in the tragedy. And turning now to the Russia-Ukraine file, Ukrainian President Volodymyr Zelensky said he had ordered his country's forces to launch 1,000 long-range drones against Russian territory every day, an increase of around 700 drones from the current level. In a televised evening address on Friday, the Ukrainian president said more drones must be launched toward Russia, adding that there is a specific target that will be achieved, as he put it. Ukrainian Presidential Office Chief Kyrylo Budanov said on Friday that technical talks on the war with Russia are likely to take place in the near future. In an interview, Budanov said the talks expected to be held soon would focus primarily on technical aspects and preparations for a major event, adding that he does not expect any agreement to be reached quickly. Spanish Interior Minister Fernando Grande Marlaska called for calm and an end to violence in Ceuta following a series of incidents linked to a recent influx of irregular migrants from Morocco. A Spanish soldier was injured Thursday when a military vehicle was attacked with stones by around 70 migrants. Spanish authorities detained 14 Moroccan nationals in connection with the incident in a separate assault on a civil guard officer. We reached the end of our newscast for tonight. Thank you for watching and have a good night.